Chapter 2. Tom turned to Lindy in annoyance. Boy, Lindy, you are the end. You talked and talked to that man. I don't think we should have encouraged him. He seemed as nutty as a fruitcake. Oh, I liked him, Lindy said defensively. Did you notice he was wearing blue and white striped socks? Ben laughed. I wonder if he was joking when he said there was something called a wangdoodle. I'll bet he wasn't, said Lindy. I'll bet he was, countered Tom. Anyway, I'm going to look that word up in the dictionary when we get home. Lindy peered out into the rain. The bus was passing a large park, and on the other side of it, half obscured by trees, she saw a tall, thin house with shuttered windows. Pointing to it, she asked Tom, Is that place really haunted? Sure. Who lives in there? A terrible ogre and a witch with yellow fangs. Well, nobody's sure about that, Ben said. But most people stay away from there, Lindy, especially on Halloween. Well, it wouldn't scare me, she declared. I don't believe in ogres, just fairies. You mean you wouldn't be scared to go up and knock on the front door? Tom asked. Not at all. I bet you would. I wouldn't. Lindy raised her chin defiantly. Well, I'll make you a bet. I bet you 5 cents that you won't go and knock on the front door of Stonehouse on Tuesday night, said Tom. That's not a good bet, Lindy hedged. Then I'll make it 25 cents. The little girl hesitated. She wanted more than anything to join her brothers this year for Halloween, but she wasn't at all sure that she'd have the courage to do what Tom had suggested. Besides which, 25 cents represented her week's allowance. You see, you are scared, Tom said triumphantly. No, I'm not, she declared loudly. It's a bet. Stop it, you two. You're both being stupid, Ben said. Don't look at me. She's the one who started it. If she's too scared to do it, then why doesn't she say so? I'm not too scared. Okay. Ben threw up his hands in disgust. But remember, Mom will probably make the final decision about it all anyway. The subject came up again that night at dinner. Lindy, what would you like to do about trick-or-treating this Halloween? Mr. Potter asked. Lindy looked at her brothers. Tom stopped eating and watched her intently across the table. I was wondering if I could go with Tom and Ben. Mrs. Potter looked at her sons. Well, what do you think, boys? Well, I don't know, replied Ben. It's fine for the other two. I mean, they just have to tag along and everything. But I'm always the one who has to be in charge. I mean, look at today. I was constantly watching out for Lindy and trying to stop her and Tom from arguing. Mr. Potter smiled. Tough to be the oldest, isn't it? Accepting responsibility is quite a chore sometimes. It sure is, Ben agreed solemnly. That's part of growing up, I'm afraid. Part of being 13 years old. Ben considered this. Lindy held her breath. I guess I don't really mind all that much, Ben said finally. I think that's very nice. Mrs. Potter seemed quite pleased. Then it's fine with us, Lindy, if that's what you'd like. Now, I suggest that we all sit by the fire for the last half hour before bedtime. Will one of you go get the Sunday paper for your father? Ben ran to fetch it. The Sunday evening get-together had become a habit all of the Potters enjoyed. The children talked about any problems that may have arisen at school, holiday plans were discussed, and everyone was encouraged to exchange ideas. The children arranged themselves comfortably. Mrs. Potter took up her knitting, and Mr. Potter lit his pipe, settled back in his favorite chair, and opened up the Bramblewood Sunday Courier. My word, Frida, look at this. What, dear? Professor Savant has been awarded the Nobel Prize. Oh, how nice. Who's Professor Savant? Tom wanted to know. Head of the Biology Research Department at the university, Mr. Potter explained. What did he get the Nobel Prize for? Ben asked. According to this, for his work in genetics, said Mr. Potter. I don't even know what the Nobel Prize is. Lindy sounded bewildered. Mr. Potter looked over his glasses at his eldest son. Can you tell her, Ben? Ben thought for a moment. I think, he said slowly, that it's a prize given every year to people who have done something really great, like in chemistry, or in writing, or in medicine, something like that. Very good, said Mr. Potter. It's also given for achievements in physics and physiology, and, very importantly, for the promotion of peace. Mrs. Potter interrupted her husband. I really think you should write to the professor, dear. Just a small letter of congratulations. It's really so wonderful for the university. Oh, which reminds me. She turned to the children. Would you all start thinking about doing a card or a letter to Grandma? You know, she's not been well at all. It would mean so much to hear from you. Lindy, perhaps you could make her one of your special cards? Okay. Tell us about the zoo today, said Mr. Potter. We met the funniest little man there, Lindy suddenly remembered. He told us about an animal called a whangdoodle. Have you ever heard of it, Daddy? A whangdoodle? No, I can't say I have. What is it? I don't know. He said it looks a bit like a horse, and it has horns. I don't think there is such an animal, said Tom. I told him so. He said to look it up in the dictionary when we got home. Well, go ahead then, said Mr. Potter. Tom ran into his father's study and took from a shelf a large, heavy black dictionary that had obviously seen a great deal of use. He carried it carefully back into the living room and placed it on the table. The children gathered around him as he thumbed through the tissue-thin pages. Watchband, Waybill, Webbing, Wessex, West Orange, Whammy. Oh, here we are, he suddenly cried excitedly. Whangdoodle. Ooh, what does it say? Lindy pushed in close. It says, noun, slang, a fanciful creature of an undefined nature. Tom looked up. Well, what the heck does that mean? Mr. Potter rose and knocked his pipe against the side of the fireplace. It probably means that a whangdoodle is a made-up word for some kind of imaginary creature, which, I would think, is why the dictionary uses the word fanciful to describe it. So I was right, Tom said. A whangdoodle doesn't exist. Probably not, replied Mr. Potter. Well, there you are. Tom turned to Ben and Lindy. I told you so. But you're not sure about that, Lindy protested. Yes, I am. I knew that old man was a phony. Oh, he wasn't. Lindy turned to Ben. You don't think he was, do you, Ben? Oh, Lindy, who knows? Ben sighed. But if he wasn't a phony or crazy or anything, then what do you suppose he meant by all that talk? We shall probably never find out, Mrs. Potter summed up. Come on, children. It's time to get ready for bed.